Recently, I asked thousands of my readers what their biggest problem is with writing online. The answer? Consistency. It didn't surprise me. I've been writing online for 5 years now, and at least 95% of the people that I've started with have quit, which is a shame because writing is the best thing that you can do for your brand and business. You know, the reputation, the reach, but all of these things come from compounding, and compounding requires persistence. But I get it, okay? Because writing is hard, right? It's bloody hard, and you need to run away from anyone who tries to sell you otherwise, right? It's tough to keep writing when no one is reading. It's tough to keep writing when no one is buying. And it's tough to keep writing when you're stuck comparing to people ahead who are making it look easy. And I know this more than most, okay? So it took me 13 months to get my first 1,000 followers and 18 months to make my first $1. But I've since turned that around over the past 5 years, and I've managed to attract over 280,000 readers across various social media platforms and grossed around $1.5 million as a result. I've come close to quitting many times, but aside from a couple of holidays, I haven't actually missed a day of writing in the 5 years. So today, I want to give you 7 critical tips to help you become an incredibly consistent writer and entrepreneur. These ideas will help you attract your ideal audience. They'll help you write when times are tough, and they'll help you outlast your competition, because 90% of this game is just persistence. Some of the ideas you can implement right now for immediate results, and others are systems based that you can improve day after day, and as the months melt into years, it's only going to get better and better. I'll also help you answer questions like, how do I keep writing when no one is reading? What do I write about when I'm running out of ideas? And how to know when to pivot or persist. So grab yourself a cup of tea and let's dive in. So my first tip is to reframe the relationship with writing. And a quick story for you. So I'm writing my first book at the moment, and I've been kind of trying to do it for the past 6 months or so, and it's been really damn difficult. I've stopped and started, I've overthought every step. I find myself worrying about it as I'm walking around, and what I realized was that I was doing the same thing I did when I first started writing, and that was I was so attached to the result. And understandably, right, writing a book is my dream. I really want to be an author, but as a result, I started to create this mountain that's almost impossible to climb. Now, you can want something without being unhealthily attached to the outcome of it. And particularly with writing, it is super important, because if you're attached to the outcome, it's only going to get harder and harder because it takes so goddamn long for something to happen. As cliche as it sounds, with writing, the journey really is the destination, okay? It's not actually about the words that you're putting on the paper. It's about the person you become in the process. It's going to improve your thinking. It's going to improve your decision making. It's going to improve your creativity. All of these things are happening long before you start seeing it getting measured with the external results. And so you really want to try to fall in love with the process. And so by reframing the relationship, what you need to think is like, what does success look like to you? For me, when I first started writing, I was like, okay, cool. If we're writing every day, that is the successful part. When it comes to my book, I just want to hold a book, right? I want to say with Kieran Drew on the name, okay? That's cool, right? And that's all I'm aiming for now. And as a result, literally the next day, I got out of my own way. I'm writing for 3 to 4 hours a day. There's no fear, there's no anxiety. It's not very good yet, but that's cool because I know that consistency will iron out all the creases. But if I'm just sitting there worrying about it, it's never really going to happen. So I'll just give you 3 ways that you can reframe it. Number 1 is to expect results in 2 years, not 2 months. Give yourself a longer time frame, and that's really going to alleviate the pressure. Number 2 is to focus on the output, not the outcome. So, if you could just tick off saying that you've written 5-6 days a week, that is absolutely fantastic, and you are doing more work than 95% of people already. You just need to prove it to yourself first, then you get to prove it to the world. And then number 3, and importantly, please celebrate the effort. Don't chase the result. Give yourself a pat on the back every time you write. Sounds cliche, but the more grateful you are for the work that you're putting in, the more that work begins to shape you. And on that note of work, the second tip is crucial, and that is to create time and track time. So let me explain. When I started writing, I was working 50, 60 hours a week as a dentist. It was 6 to 7 days a week, and dentistry is not a job where you can kind of half-ass it, right? I used to come back absolutely exhausted, and I would tell myself, I'm going to write in the evenings, okay? It only took one difficult patient for me to be like, I'm not going to do that. And then before I know it, 4 or 5 days have gone by and I haven't made any progress towards my dream. Yeah, so I kept stopping and starting like an old car engine spluttering away, and it was incredibly frustrating. I'd end up in these weird shame cycles where I'd beat the hell out of myself for not pursuing my dream, but then I wouldn't actually do it to a point where it was making me feel good. Right? And then everything changed when I made 2 decisions. The first was that I would start my day building my dream and not my boss's. So I began, first off, I just started waking up half an hour earlier and I would write for 30 minutes. The second decision was that I bought a calendar and I tracked 2 things: time writing, time reading. And I just set one goal. At the end of each week, I would write more than the week before and I would read more than the week before. And what began to happen was that the morning writing sessions became so goddamn beautiful. No matter how tired I was, I couldn't wait for them. And they got earlier and earlier and earlier. And before I knew it, I started waking up at 5 a.m. I know, like, your classic hustle, bro. 5 a.m. I would wake up, I would write. And even if I had a 12-hour shift of dentistry afterwards, it didn't matter because I'd already started the day with my purpose, right? And I always said purpose is a hell of a drug. It is the best morning alarm that you need. And then by doing the calendar trick, I was so motivated to kind of keep pushing myself that I ended up not watching TV because I was like, well, I'd rather read and write. I ended up writing in my lunch breaks, writing in the evenings. And if I did end up, kind of being a bit too busy in the mornings or we have something going on, I would clock in 20-30 minutes on my phone and write there instead. Do not underestimate the power of persistence, those small daily efforts adding up. So you've got to create time and you have to track your time. And speaking of time, this next tip is going to make you so much more effective with the time that you have, and that is to make it effortless to do the hard thing. So I told you that statistic where I think at least 95% of people that I started with have quit. Is that a depressing fact? Like, some people will think so, but not really, because you're not competing with the crowd, you're competing with the survivors. And the enemy of consistency is friction. The harder it is for you to do the hard work, the less you're going to want to do it. I realized this as a dentist because I was like, look, I've only got an hour to write or 2 hours to write. And so I want to maximize my creative energy doing that thing well so that I can really get the most juice from the squeeze. And so I began to take it very seriously. And what does that look like? Well, I'd have my kettle filled with water. I'd have my tea bags laid out. I'd have the right document open and I'd have notes of what I was going to write about that day. And by the way, I've got other videos around the writing system stuff, so you might want to watch that after this. I would do every single thing that I could the night before so that when I sat down in the morning to write, all I had to do was sit there and type. And another thing that helps with that, by the way, is like blocking social media from your phone, not having your phone in your bedroom, because I realized as soon as I checked social media, my focus was gone. And by the way, 5 years later, where I have no commitments, right, where my calendar is pretty much empty all the time, I still follow this exact same rule. My friend laughs at me because he comes in, there's tea bags laid out on the counter, and he's like, wow, like, you're taking it so seriously. And it's like, of course I am, right? Because you're not writing like some casual, Sunday soccer player, right? Think of yourself as an athlete and you've got to prepare for it, right? You've got to remove as much friction as possible. It will just get easier and easier to write. And then before you know it, it feels like madness not to write. Because as I said, writing is hard, but that is why you need to make it easy. And speaking of easy, the next 3 tips are going to make what you actually write a lot easier. But before we do that, I've written a guide called the 5 Pillars of Magnetic Writing. It's completely free. It will tell you what to write, what to say on each day. And that's a really key part about making writing easy, is that you need to get rid of the writer's block. Okay, so the guide is down in the link below. Pick it up. You get to join my email list. There's loads of good tips there too. And otherwise, let's move on to the next tip. So this one is called to serve your shadow. A lot of writers I know, particularly the early writers, they quit because they get frustrated. They try to write to everyone and write to no one. They don't know what to say. They don't think that they're doing very well. And what we're doing here is we're putting so much pressure on the output to be good that we're really getting in our own way, right? It's like that meme where you got the boot holding yourself down, okay? Serving your shadow is this concept where you write to your past self, right? It's just you and your past self having a conversation online. And there are a few benefits of this, right? Number one is ideation, because everything you do today can become content for tomorrow, right? Everything you learn, everything you do, everything you think, all you're doing is relaying it back to yourself. Number two is that the teacher learns the most. So you can go and read a book and then you go and write that book to yourself, and actually you end up just learning that much faster. So you've got a really cool feedback loop, and people will eventually be like, oh, how do you know so much about this thing? So I've just been teaching myself in public. And then the third benefit of that is that by extension, if you're writing to yourself, your audience is going to become an extension of yourself, right? You've got a group of like-minded people, of shared beliefs, of shared interests, and that is an incredibly powerful position for whatever you want to do with your business. Oh, by the way, you'll actually have a lot more fun, okay? And you know, fun is one of these underrated tools of success. How you feel seeps through into the page, okay? Even when I'm recording this right now, when I first started doing the YouTube videos, obviously we're on about YouTube number 6, number 7, it felt a bit kind of clunky, mechanic, and now just before I write, I think about Kieran from 2 years ago and I'm like, sit down man, let's have a little chat about what we're up to today. It just feels much more natural, and the same happens with your writing. So before you sit down, right, just picture who you were, right, and just think, I'm just gonna write to you now, right, and keep it casual. So tip number 5 is to become an idea machine. I was reading my emails recently and a popular writer competitor sent out an email saying writer's block isn't real. And I read it with a grin on my face because I was like, fantastic. You have no clue what you're talking about. You haven't spoken to your audience in a long time. Writer's block is real and it's horrible, okay? We all know what it feels like to sit there, look at the blank page, but what am I actually writing here? What I realized was that if there was ever a point where I was asking those questions, like what am I writing? What am I doing? I'm not doing my work properly, the pre-work for writing. And so having a lack of ideas is like having a lack of fuel for the engine of your car. And we really want to take the ideation process seriously. The more ideas you have, the easier it gets to write. And I don't say this lightly, by the way. I used to struggle to have one idea per week. And then if I look in my Notion, actually, let me show you my Notion. I collect notes like a squirrel collects nuts, okay? And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of ideas here that I'm just writing down. Most of them are crap, okay? But I just take them constantly. We also save every single good post that I have, and I went through all of these yesterday. It took almost an hour and a half, and it just goes on and on and on and on, and it's just endless the amount of ideas that we have. And so I want to give you a few tips in terms of how to get good at ideas. Number 1 is to take notes constantly, right? Because if you do not write down an idea immediately, you will lose it indefinitely. I take this so seriously that when I was dating, I haven't been on a date in a little while, unfortunately, I would tell the girl that if I pull out my phone to go on it, I'm not on social media, I'm not texting, I've had an idea. It's that important to be writing them down. Number 2 is to pay attention to what catches your attention. When people say that they don't have any interesting ideas, it's because they're not letting themselves get interested enough. We all have natural curiosities, but we're so busy with our day-to-day that we don't give ourselves the free rein to explore it. And so as you're going about your day, as you're reading, as you're doing anything, if something catches your eye, pause and think why. Like, what is it about that that's interesting to me? Take a note about it, because what interests you will likely interest people just like you, and you kind of become a mirror of your curiosity in a great way to attract other people. And then number 3 is an idea that I picked up from James Altucher, which is absolutely fantastic, and that's to write down 10 ideas per day. Do it at the start of your morning, okay? You just write down 10 ideas, 10 interesting things to write about, 10 interesting business ideas, which means that you ended up with what? Over 3,000 ideas just in one document. 95% were terrible. Okay, but that's still like 150, 200 great ideas that were there to write about. But more importantly, you were training your creativity muscle to really think about the ideation process. So if you do those 3 things, I guarantee to you, it's like the floodgates begin to open, and then you're just gonna wish that you had more time to write. Not a consistency issue. Oh, and one more tip on there. Walk more. Just walk more. A ton more than you are right now. I walk 20,000 steps at least every day. 90% of that time is no podcasts, although podcasts are quite good too. You just, again, pay attention, pause it, write down what you're saying. Walking boosts your creativity. It boosts your judgment. It's nice to get out of the house, away from the computer. 90% of the work will happen away from the computer. So if you want to write well, just walk more. And speaking of writing well, The next tip is absolutely crucial, and that is to use the fan filter. I mentioned before that I'd come close to quitting many times, and when I began to think of why, it was just ridiculously obvious what was going wrong. I was writing to please a crowd. I was following trends, I was following tactics, I was just writing stuff that I was like, this is crap, right? This is boring. I was writing stuff I didn't want to write. And by the way, I didn't even realize, okay? Like I was just there going, oh, like we're chasing the algorithm, it's cool. But it's a bit like, I don't know, doing drugs where you're like, oh, this was really fun in the moment, and then you hate yourself after. It was like that weird cycle, okay? And then one day I was on Twitter, I had my most viral post at the time, I think it was like 12,000 likes, and I saw two writers that I really respect laughing at me. And wow, I saw red. I was so angry. I was so embarrassed. Like, screw these guys. They must be so jealous of my ability to go viral. Little did I know. And then I went for a walk, okay? And I thought, well, actually, one second, maybe there's no smoke without fire. And I came back and I read my content through their eyes, and I was disgusted. I was like, holy shit, I would never follow you, right? I definitely wouldn't think you were a great writer. I think you're just another generic copycat clone C of noise adder. It was a very humbling realization that you absolutely cannot write for an algorithm. You have to write for an audience. I have seen so many brands build a fast audience and then poof, gone, right? The only people that are surviving right now are the ones that genuinely love what they write. And so the fan filter is super, super simple. Would I be a genuine fan of what I'm about to post? If the answer is no, do not post it. If the answer is yes, proceed. What you will find, it may be scary. For example, if it's going against the grain of what is working at the moment, you may find that your growth is going to slow down, right? How you grow is much more important than how fast, and making an impression is much more important than number of impressions. You have to have faith that this is going to work, because the more you follow your curiosity, right, the more you're a fan of your own writing, the stronger the relationship you build with your reader, and the writer with the strongest relationships will win. And you're going to find consistency bloody easy because you're having fun, and nobody can compete with you if you're having fun. And speaking of fun, this leads me to the 7th point, and it's one that I have learned the hard way as an introverted writer, is that don't write in silence. Now, I don't mean this as in write with music, although if writing with music helps, then absolutely write with music. I mean that writing is a very lonely profession, okay? It is just you and the computer. And when I quit dentistry, I thought that was absolutely fantastic, because I had diagnosed myself with IBS. I don't mean the bowel stuff, I mean introverted business syndrome. I had spent all day with nurses and patients for 5 years, and all I wanted to do was just be by myself. But writing is long, it is hard, and you really want to go at it with other people. If you're just alone, you're going to miss two things that are super important for consistency, and that is connection and accountability. To put it simply, it is so much easier to quit when you're hiding in the shadows, which is why few people want to put themselves out there in the first place. So what you want to do is, number one, if you can, find people to grow with, right? So I have maybe 3 to 5 friends, and I'm not saying that we're like sharing content and they have to like my stuff and all that, because by the way, engagement pods made me want to kill myself. Killing yourself is the antithesis to consistency, so I just stopped doing that stuff, right? But what you want to do is find some friends that are on the same mission, so you can share the goals, so you can share the wins, you can share the doubts. The second one is you can hack accountability by posting in public and saying like, this is what I'm going to do. So I do this every time I'm terrified, right? So for example, the book, I'm like, man, you're overthinking this. Great. Tell everybody about it, because now everyone is watching, okay? And that puts pressure on it. Not too much pressure, because I realize that nobody actually cares, but we're monkeys, right? We like to look consistent. Tell people you're going to do something and you'll be much more likely to do it. Now, if you're not comfortable doing it in public, then go tell a friend. Say, I need to post for 30 days, right? We do it in challenges, by the way. So I like to do 90-day sprints, but if you're just starting, 30 days, I'm going to post 30 times. You're going to keep me accountable. And if I don't do it, the forfeit is I'm going to run around the streets of London naked, or whatever you're going to set. But set some forfeit, right? And that will kind of give you a bit of pressure there and just get your friend involved with you too. And the fourth tip is something that I have really come to fall in love with recently, and that is just to hire a mentor. So for example, I'm learning Spanish at the moment. And again, I'm the old car engine of stopping and starting, but I've got 3 weeks until I arrive in South America. And I need to learn some Spanish. Necesito aprender español. So I hired a Spanish tutor. And every week I have almost come close to quitting. But I know I'm like, oh God, man, I've already paid her like 400 quid. So I'm gonna do it. Hiring a mentor is really good because you're keeping accountable to someone a few steps ahead, but more importantly, they believe that you can do it when you can't. And that is absolutely critical. So the first mentor I hired as a writer, or kind of on the entrepreneurial side, I just didn't believe that I could monetize, right? I had no problem making money as a dentist, didn't believe I could make money as a writer. And I would just speak to him occasionally and he'd be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. And then I'd launch the offer and then people would pay me. And I was like, oh, wow, that worked. And then I hired a mentor for a year-long business engagement. Right? And suddenly, when I'm like relaxing or I'm doing like weird projects and I'd tell him about it, he'd be like, what are you doing, man? Like, you said you wanted to do this thing. And they'd be like, oh yeah, thank you. And I'd go and do that thing. So you must have some form of external accountability. And I think that if you're, like we've got the friend side of things, but when you pay attention. Okay. So if you can find someone a few steps ahead, give them money, get their time, set goals with them, and then get them to hold you accountable to it too. Most importantly, guys, enjoy yourself. All right, because writing is a long and beautiful journey. It's worth every word. It's worth every effort. The most consistent writer will win in the end, right? So follow these tips and I guarantee you will be one of them. And remember, if you want a content guide, we have the 5 Pillars of Magnetic Writing ebook. It's completely free. It takes 5 minutes to read, instant improvements in your content. You'll know precisely what to say to attract your one true fan. And that's going to be half the work for you, okay? I do that bit and then all you've got to do is sit down at the computer and get typing.